The horror of salt rooms in Syria's Saydnaya prison. A deep dive into detainee testimonies. Since the onset of the Syrian civil war in 2011, countless harrowing stories have emerged from inside the notorious Saydnaya prison near Damascus, one of the regime's most feared detention centers. Among the darkest of these are accounts of the so-called salt rooms, spaces where the bodies of deceased detainees were preserved using coarse salt due to the lack of refrigeration facilities. In this feature, we explore testimonies from survivors who witnessed these chilling rooms firsthand, offering a glimpse into the scale of suffering and inhumanity within Syria's prison system. A taste of salt, a glimpse of death. Abdo, a former detainee whose name has been changed to protect his identity, recalls one of the most traumatic moments of his life inside Saydnaya. In the winter of 2017, as he was being escorted to a court session, a guard shoved him into a room he had never seen before. His bare feet sank into what felt like gravel, but it was actually rock salt. This was particularly ironic and cruel. For 2 years, Abdo hadn't tasted salt in his food, an intentional deprivation by the prison authorities to physically weaken detainees. Driven by hunger and craving, he scooped up a handful of salt and tasted it. But the small moment of twisted pleasure quickly turned to horror. As he explored the room, he stumbled, literally, upon death. A cold, rigid foot beneath his step revealed a corpse lying in the salt. Then he saw another, and another. The terror was paralyzing. "I froze," he told AFP. "I thought it was my time to die. I sat down by the wall and started to cry and recite the Quran." The room, described as about 6 meters wide and up to 8 meters long, had an iron door and was located on the first floor of a building known as the Red Building, the heart of Saydnaya's prison compound. Abdo remained there for over 90 minutes, gripped by fear, surrounded by the dead, and certain that he would soon join them. When the guard finally returned and led him to a prisoner transport vehicle, relief washed over him, but the trauma was far from over. Near the exit, he noticed empty black body bags, the same type he had once been ordered to use to carry the corpses of fellow detainees. He was eventually released in 2020, but he says the prison left him emotionally numb. "My heart died in Saydnaya," he said. "Nothing affects me anymore. Even if someone tells me my brother died, it's just normal now." Another witness to the salt chambers, Motasem Abdul Sadr, now 42 and living in southern Turkey, had a similarly terrifying experience. On April 27, 2014, he was told he would be released. Overjoyed, he said goodbye to his cellmates and followed the guard, only to be pushed into a strange room filled ankle-deep with coarse salt, just like Abdo's story. In the room were 4 or 5 corpses. "They look like mummies," Motasem said, "just skin on bones, barely holding together." He remained in the room for about 3 to 4 hours, soaked in sweat from fear and tension. His panic was so intense that he urinated on the salt-covered floor, then tried to cover the stain with more salt to avoid punishment. He had entered prison in 2011 weighing 98 kilograms. When he was released, he weighed just 42 kilograms. The purpose of the salt rooms. The Association of Detainees and the Missing in Saydnaya Prison, ADMSP, has documented the existence of at least 2 salt rooms in the prison. According to co-founder Diab Syria, these rooms were first used around mid-2013 when the death toll began to rise dramatically. The salt served as a primitive preservative, slowing the decomposition of bodies until they could be removed. Why use salt instead of installing proper morgues or refrigerators? Simply put, the regime had no interest in preserving the dignity of the deceased. These rooms were about utility, not compassion. Some detainees even speculate that placing prisoners briefly in the salt rooms was a deliberate act of psychological torture, forcing them to confront death directly. The absence of odor, the presence of fear. Interestingly, neither Abdo nor Motasem recalled any foul smells inside the rooms, proof of how effectively the salt absorbed fluids and inhibited decomposition. But that absence of smell did nothing to reduce the psychological terror. For both men, the moments in the salt rooms were the most horrific of their entire imprisonment. "I wasn't afraid of the dead bodies," Motasem said. "I was afraid because I thought I was about to be executed." A tool of intimidation and a mark of a systematic crime. These salt rooms are not an anomaly. They reflect the industrial scale of torture and death within Syrian prisons under Bashar al-Assad's regime. Deaths due to torture, disease, malnutrition, and neglect are common. Survivors' testimonies, like those of Abdo and Motassem, are now being used in investigations and court cases in Europe.